Hello, folks. Thanks for tuning in to TD Talks. Today is April 16th, 2025, the day after tax day. We don't like that. It's the day after tax day. Hopefully, you got your stuff filed. And if you didn't, you'll file an extension and owe whatever you owe with interest. But if they owe you money back, they don't pay it with interest. I don't like that. I think we got to fix that. Today, TD Talks export controls. That's kind of the headline that I'm seeing today. It's what's caused a fluctuation here in the stock market is the announcement of these export controls, specifically with chips into China. It's primarily affected, kind of isolated to NVIDIA and AMD, Advanced Micro Devices. Those two companies have been affected the most because they do a ton of business in China. They already have very limited, chip capabilities that they can sell, but this is really tightening the chain on what can be sold into China, to Chinese companies and all the rest. So it's going to have an effect there. Some of the stocks of the companies that they sell these chips to have had a reaction to it as well. Um, I think that this is more of a defensive decision from the Trump administration. They're viewing this not from a financial position. None of the new administration's initiatives have really tied into growing the stock market. Presidents rarely are entirely focused on the stock market. They're more focused on their chief role, which is protecting the country, whether it be from, physical warfare or economic warfare. They're focused on protecting the country and its defense. And the Trump administration's, one of their main core beliefs is that we're not protected well economically from China. They believe that we have too much allocation for what we do in business or how much imports we rely on from China. And I agree with that. How they're going about doing it, is agreeable or disagreeable depending on your opinion or how it affects you. But from what we've seen so far, based on NVIDIA's filing, they say that this export control limitation for what they sell into China is going to cost them about 5.5 billion in expenses in a region where last year I think that they did between 12 and 15 billion in revenue. So 5.5 billion is quite the chunk. If you wipe out a third of your revenue with new expenses, it really cuts down on whatever margin is there anyway. So that's why the market's had quite a reaction. I'm guessing that will be negotiated and handled and all that sort of stuff. We've seen kind of this run and gun approach with the tariffs. I can't even count at this point how many changes we've seen to the tariffs, and I think they'll continue to change. Every other headline I've looked at is talking about the negotiations with the other 70 to 75 countries that have agreed to negotiate on tariffs. That the messaging from the Trump administration has been solely focused on isolating China. That's their message to the rest of the countries is we need to come up with a deal that isolates China because they've developed this, real centralized power control based on how much they export to other countries. And apparently, for every headline I'm reading from Politico to Newsweek to the Wall Street Journal to Barron's to Fortune to all the rest, they're all saying that, their sources are saying that the messaging from the United States government at this time to the other 70 to 75 countries that have come to the table to negotiate is they're going to come up with deals with those countries, and the end game is to isolate China. So far, that's pretty much exactly how it's played out. Most recently, I've seen from Chinese sources that President Xi is uh, willing to negotiate with the Trump administration. They actually put in a backup quarterback, their head negotiator. They've exchanged them recently, which I don't think a lot of people have, really expected. Maybe they thought they'd put in a different person with some different talent. I don't know, but they've exchanged their tariff negotiator. They put in a new person, but apparently they're willing to negotiate if they get respect from the White House. They're looking for respect. Um, I can see how they feel disrespected. I think anybody could, but let's not pretend that they haven't disrespected the United States economically, militarily, in pretty much every way that they could. Just because they don't do it in headlines or from a news conference doesn't mean they're not doing it. They do a lot of things subversively. And so I think it'll be interesting. I don't know how much handshaking and smiles and pats on the back they'll get in terms of respect. But I'm sure that somebody like a Steve Witkoff in the Trump administration, he's a pretty level-headed guy, pretty solid communicator, negotiator. He's done a really good job in the Middle East. So I think that they'll probably make sure that he's in the room and probably leads a lot of those discussions and leaves a lot of the entertainers from the administration out of that room in order to get a deal done and get tariffs renegotiated. But this is kind of a reset. What we've seen, and from what I've seen for a long time economically, this is quite the reset. What these tariffs are doing is creating a reset. It's a reset of supply chain, a reset of global business and how it's done. The way that there's been new announcements about, increasing, order flow in other countries, not China, and decreases from, order flow from countries in China. It's created a total global reset, which I frankly think is needed. Again, you may not like how it's been rolled out or whatever, but nonetheless, it needs to be done. And the Trump administration approach is just go hard and fast and do whatever. One thing I always like to remind myself and anybody that I talk to, in my opinion, is you can't control that stuff. So don't get emotionally caught up in it. You can't control how they implement an agenda. All you can do is control what you can control, which is how you react and how you think and how you plan. So getting emotionally tied up in what is said or how it's rolled out or what's on the chart in the rose garden or whether you like it or not, or maybe you agree with the policy but not the way it's rolled out. Well, you can't control that. You're not in that room. You're not in that Oval Office. Neither am I. We can't control how those things are rolled out. All we can control is how we see the chessboard and how we play it as individuals, as families, as business owners, as executives, whatever it may be. Control what you can control and don't get all tied up and emotional on how something's rolled out. Stay focused, detach from the emotions of things. We as humans don't make very good decisions when we make them emotionally. We just don't. And so when you see these things, you see these headlines, in my opinion, the best thing you can do is detach from the emotion and think, okay, I can't control that. The only thing I can control is how I'm going to react and how I'm going to play the game and go from there. So I think that these export controls, frankly, are more of a governmental defensive positioning to limit, the level of technology that gets sold into China, which they undoubtedly will try to study, reverse engineer, and then sell back to the rest of the world cheaper than what they could, buy it for. It's been going on forever. And you can't litigate it in Chinese courts. You can't go in and litigate, hey, they've completely stolen our intellectual property or design patents, whatever. You can't do it. You can't do it. And maybe this hardball approach will bring them to the table and say, if you want to be a part, you're now isolated. You're now isolated against the rest of the world. Now you have to come to the table and decide if you're going to operate in a more fair, ethical, free trade fashion, or if you're going to continue to do these subversive actions that you've gotten away with for far too long. So we'll see. But this is a defensive positioning being done right now, not an economic decision. Pretty much everything we've seen so far has been about, like an idealism of resetting the stage, having a reset of global trade and immigration and all the rest. So we'll see how this plays out in the long run. But again, in my opinion, play the long game. Play the long game, control what you can control. Don't get emotional about things you can't control. Just focus on how you play the game. Thanks for tuning in to TD Talks here on April 16th, 2025. Make sure to subscribe, whether it's on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, or Spotify, so you get an update every time I share my market commentary. Y'all take care. The views and opinions voiced in this podcast are solely the views and opinions of Taylor Davis and do not reflect the views or opinions of any other entity or organization. The content provided is for informational purposes only and is not meant to be specific investment advice for any individual. Please consult with your financial advisor to address your unique circumstances. Taylor Davis does not provide legal or tax advice.